welcome back. This is Poncho Smith, and without further ado, what presumably will be the exciting conclusion to this adventure known as her Lullaby. So without further ado, let's hop right into the endgame. Lori? Even with the terrible lighting, I could tell it was true. It was Lori. I recognized her from that night at the club. She looked a lot different now, though. At the club, she was cute, short, flirty, obviously smarter than me, chugging a lot of booze and laughing way too much at my dumb jokes. This Lori was more intimidating. Her eyes were hard and angry, her face contorted in a tight-lipped frown. Her presence seemed to stretch across the whole room. Two differences were especially obvious, though. Number one, her clothes were drenched with blood. And number two, she was holding a gun. Lori? My God, what's going on? Why are you... Toko's voice cracked as she spoke, her face reflecting her complete disbelief. As Toko began to lose her composure, I could feel my body tremor with the same fear as we both looked up at Tori's menacing form. Throughout this whole ordeal, Toko had managed to seem more calm and composed than anyone would. Hell, just moments ago, she was the one comforting me. And yet... Oh. No, don't let me interrupt. I'll wait. Her tone of voice was mechanical and monotone. To an outsider, she might even seem bored or uninterested, but given what both Toko and I were seeing, we knew something was very wrong. I'm not sure why you're holding her like that, though. Toko, you're being awfully romantic. Didn't I tell you? She's not very good. We pulled ourselves away from one another and stood up, both trying to grasp what we were seeing. A girl we were both familiar with stood before us, only now she looked like a villain from some late-night slasher flick. I mean, the blood all over her clothes was definitely a bad sign, and on top of that, she had a fucking gun. Our situation had gone from worse to dire, and there was no way in hell anyone in this room had their head screwed on straight. Lori, what's happened to you? She looked at Toko, genuinely puzzled, then down at her own blood-caked attire. Huh? You mean my clothes? Well, I mean... It doesn't really make sense to dirty up a bunch of my clothes every time, you know? So I figured I'd just keep using these. It's kinda like a uniform when you think about it. Her matter-of-fact tone was positively frightening. The words every time bored into my skull as my eyes widened with surprise. To her, for some reason, this was normal. It was now more clear than ever that we were in the middle of some very serious shit. Gun. Toko's voice sounded smaller than ever as she tried to speak. She brought everyone's attention to the most dangerous object in the room. Lori lifted the weapon up to her face, staring at it and analyzing it as if for the first time. Oh, this? Well, it's for killing people. I could hear Toko's tiny voice whimpering as she took small steps backward from Lori. Lori was quick to close the distance between them, however, and approached with her gun at the ready. Toko, I need you to do something for me. Go over to that corner and pick up the knife. Toko couldn't say a word. All she could do was shake her head no in defiance, tears welling up in her eyes as she unwittingly backed herself against the wall. Lori, please. With Toko now defenseless and essentially cornered, Lori pressed herself even closer, casually raising the barrel of her gun up to Toko's chin. I'm not asking. Time stood still. Silence filled the room. Not even Toko's tearful pleading and pitiful protests could be heard now. My mind raced, simulating every single dreadful outcome that the situation seemed to offer. All I could do was stand there, stunned, silent by the very real threat of violence occurring in front of me. What the fuck was I doing? Why was I letting this happen? Was there really nothing I could do? Come the fuck on, Sal! You're the tough chick! In high school, people learned quick not to fuck with me. I'd never once in my life backed down from a fight. I didn't always win, but I never fucking backed down. And again, nobody I ever fought had a gun either. I had to do something. If I could get her out of here alive somehow. I didn't particularly care if I lived, to be honest. I'd been okay with the idea of dying for a while, honestly. The last time I OD'd, I thought I'd finally succeeded. Stupid doormate came home from a stupid party earlier than expected, though. So now, here I was, in a real life-or-death situation. Without having to consider my own safety, my mind formulated a few options. The sound of Toko's footsteps broke the silence. She walked right past me. Keeping her head down, she slowly made her way toward the knives. Lori kept her gun's sights trained on Toko's back. Without a word, Toko leaned over, grabbed her knife from earlier, and slowly trudged her way back towards Lori's position. They just stood there in silence, keeping her gaze fixed to the floor as Lori reached out and stroked her tear-soaked chin. That's a good girl. From seemingly out of nowhere, I noticed that Lori had produced what looked like a syringe. Either Toko hadn't noticed it, or she'd already given up at this point. All she did was stare at the ground. You're going to sleep now, all right? And when you wake up, it's all going to be okay. You'll be free. Fuck. Despite the slight chill in the air, I felt sweat on my brow as I breathed in heavily. My thoughts raced and the tightness in my chest was suffocating. I clenched my fists and gritted my teeth, steeling myself for whatever came next. And we have a few options here. For the sake of completion... Yeah, sorry, Sal. It was decided. I was doing this. I had to stop this. Without a word, I sprang into action. I darted across the room towards them, fixing my eyes on Lori's back. Once she was within reach, I extended my arms to grab and pull her away from Toko. Immediately after I made contact with her, I felt her elbow crash into my throat. I stumbled backward, completely surprised by her blinding speed and her counterattack, and felt her hand firmly grip my shoulder. She stepped around my left leg, sweeping my foot right from under me as she pushed me straight to the ground. The force of it completely knocked the wind out of me. I struggled to regain my breath and get back on my feet, but was immediately pushed back to the ground as Lori stomped on my chest, pinning me down with her foot. Lori, please stop! It was the first I'd heard her speak with anything but a whine or whimper since Lori revealed herself. She reached out toward Lori, who returned her gesture by pointing the gun right between her eyes. Toko shrank back against the wall, a look of sheer terror on her face, her whimpering giving way to full-on sobbing. Lori once again stomped her foot as hard as she could on my chest to keep me down and pointing her gun directly at my face. I hope you're asking yourself if that was a smart thing to do, and that you're answering that question with a no. I grabbed her leg and ankle in an attempt to get out from under her, but no matter how hard I struggled, she refused to budge. Fuck you. It was clear that I was now in way over my head. Fuck you? That's all I got? God damn it, Sal, get it together! The stone-cold expression on her face never changed. She just looked down at me, keeping her aim trained straight at my forehead. My eyes darted around the room, looking for any possible opportunity. All I could see was the same dark, shitty basement I'd been stuck in this whole time. And now I had no way to arm myself. I violently tried to shake her off, grabbing hold of her leg with as much firm grip as I could muster, using all of my weight to try and roll out from under her. The more I struggled, the more force she applied to my chest. I balled my fists and desperately threw punches at her shin, an act that looked as pathetic as it sounds, and defiantly tried to taunt her into letting me up. "Come on, bitch!" So that was the sudden end. True to its name. But you know what? It can't end like this. You know what? It won't end like this. Alright. We get a mulligan, we get a second chance. Let's yell to get her attention. I inhaled sharply and ignored the nervous pounding in my chest. "Hey! You. Bitch. Aren't you forgetting about someone? Get the hell away from her." At first she seemed unfazed by my taunting, then she slowly turned to look over her shoulder. Her eyes stared fiery holes in me as her brow furrowed. Her lips curled into an annoyed sneer. She turned around and strode toward me with quick steps. Before I could open my mouth to say anything, she had already jerked her hand up and violently pushed the barrel of her gun to the middle of my forehead. I flinched lightly as the cold muzzle came into contact with my skin, but stopped short of stumbling backward in an effort to prove to her that I wasn't afraid. She leaned in close to me, her nostrils flaring. It felt like her palpable anger would be enough to force me onto the ground on its own if she didn't choose to do so in some other fashion. Through gritted teeth, she hissed at me. "I don't remember asking for your input." She pushed the gun harder into my forehead as I gritted my teeth and pushed back. "Do you think you're somehow important? Did you think that for even a second you meant anything to what's going on here?" Her lips curled into a devious smile around her clenched teeth. Hushed, menacing laughter escaped her. "Because you don't. Not at all. So the peanut gallery, that's you, by the way, should just keep their mouths shut. Because if you don't, I'm going to blow your fucking brains out." "Lori, stop!" Toko's scream was enough to startle us both. I thought I'd already been shot. Lori spun around, aimed, and... My ears were ringing. The room had fallen into a deathly silence. My eyes quickly scanned the room to assess what had just happened as I tried to get my wits about me. Lori stood with her back to me, her arm extended, gun still pointed at. I winced as my eyes traced the sight line from the gun to her intended target. I braced myself for the worst as my gaze found its way to Toko. She was still standing. She was frozen, a look of sheer terror on her face. To her left, I noticed a small hole in the wall, no doubt created from the shot Lori just fired. Lori's voice broke the silence. "Toko, my dear, I need you to be quiet for a moment, okay?" Her disdain and intensity vanished as she spoke tenderly to Toko. The sudden shift in her mood was unsettling. But maybe... Oh boy. It's Now or never. This was going to be my only chance, and I took it. I squared up, adjusted my stance, and planted myself firmly where I stood, balled my fists, and took a deep breath to harden my resolve. I reached out towards Lori's right shoulder and grasped it firmly, using as much force as I could to spin her back around to face me. For the first time, she seemed to be the one surprised and taken aback by someone's actions. Without delay, I drew my left fist back as far as I could and sent it hurtling right toward her face. I felt my fist make contact. A split second later, I realized it wasn't her face I was feeling, but instead Lori's own right hand clenching my fist. She violently threw my arm to the side and drew back her left hand, forcefully swinging it toward and crashing her gun right into the side of my face. I stumbled backward immediately, clutching my jaw and cheekbone in pain. Lori was quick to pursue, drawing back once more and sending the butt of the gun screaming right into my temple. I lost my footing and fell on my ass, completely disoriented. Ignoring the intense pain in my head, my hands scrambled across the floor around me, trying to brace myself to stand once more, flailing uselessly as Lori pinned me. Where the fuck did this girl learn to fight? She straddled my thighs, baring her fangs in contempt. All I could do was look up at her intimidating figure as I tried to wriggle my way from under her. She continued pelting me with blows from the side of her gun as I brought both my arms up to protect my head as best I could. After her relentless assault, she pointed the gun directly at my face. You're done. You are so dead. I thrust my hands up toward her and grabbed at her wrist, attempting to wrench the gun from her to no avail. She struggled against me, the barrel of the gun waving back and forth in my face as I fought with all my might to keep her from getting any kind of aim or pulling the trigger. The more I fought back, the more determined she became, her hand free, now also grasping the gun as she used her weight to try to overpower me. As I pushed back against her sheer force, I bent myself into a more favorable sitting position, the force of our combined strength now pointing her gun toward the ceiling. I felt like I was making meaningful progress at disarming her when I caught a glimpse of something over her shoulder. It was Toko. She stood still there, frozen in place, unable to react to what was unfolding in front of her. As the strength in my arms started to give in under the pressure of Lori's assault, I knew it wouldn't be long until she overpowered me. Lori was just too damn strong, ferocious, and angry for me to keep up with her. There was no way I was winning this with brute force alone. I felt myself panicking more and more as my arms gave in. Come the fuck on. There had to be something I could... I almost laughed out loud for even thinking it. I didn't really have much choice in the matter at this point. Oh boy. Well, I'm not giving up, but... Well, there's no way this can work, but it might be crazy enough to. Toko, no! Stay back! And that was the moment I needed. Sensing she may be in danger, Lori's attention wavered as she looked over her shoulder toward Toko. I was fucking astounded that actually worked, but not so surprised that I overlooked my chance. With her focus behind her, Lori was distracted enough for me to seize both sides of her head with my hands. I forced her head back around to face me and reared back, thrusting my forehead forward and right into the bridge of her nose. She was immediately dazed by my counterattack, reeling backward as I held onto her and delivered another headbutt. And another. That's when I heard the unmistakable metallic sound of the gun falling from her hand and onto the floor near us. I'd barely had enough time to process the fact that I'd managed to get the drop on her without headbutting someone repeatedly fucking hurt before she was once again bearing down on me. A violent and furious scowl crossed her lips as blood dripped from her nose onto me. She reached down and wrapped her hands around my neck. Panic set in as she squeezed and choked off my oxygen. Her grip only intensified as I tried to pry her fingers away from my throat. As she squeezed, she violently shook my body up and down against the floor. My vision faded and distorted the longer she held on. My ability to resist and fight back quickly faded. I felt the strength in my arms and legs wavering. My vision tunneled inward until I couldn't see anything at all. I dipped in and out of consciousness as my will sapped away. As I meekly struggled and gasped for air, my hands dragged across the floor, feeling for any kind of leverage I could find. And that's when I felt it. I felt cold metal brush against the fingers of my right hand. Oh, we got no choice. Staying conscious proved to be a challenge, as did trying to keep her attention long enough to conceal my actions. I blindly felt around the metallic object, carefully positioning it so I could wrap my fingers around the handle. There was no confusion. There was no static or ringing in my ears. My thoughts were perfectly clear. I gripped as firmly as my remaining strength would allow, raised my arm, and weakly pushed the barrel of the gun into her gut. Silence. A sickening and utterly foul silence. As soon as I pulled the trigger, my stomach churned. If it hadn't been for the girl strangling the life out of me, the contents of my stomach would have created a rather unpleasant mess. Her grip on my throat loosened. I gasped hard and tried to get oxygen deep into my lungs. And still, there was silence. The weight of what I had just done crashed down onto my shoulders all at once. Conflicting emotions raced through my mind at a frightening pace as I processed the fact that I just shot someone. I just shot someone. And they were likely going to die. I did this. I had to. Right? And yet I found myself overcome by so many opposing thoughts that on the surface may not make sense. The fight felt like it lasted forever, but it had all taken in the span of about a minute or two. It had been mere seconds since I pulled the trigger. I forced myself to open my eyes, but couldn't muster the courage to look up at her. Guilt. The strongest of all emotions I felt was guilt. And for some reason, I felt like I owed it to her to look. So I did. For the first time since she revealed herself, Laurie's face reflected an emotion other than anger or contempt. It was a look of complete shock and surprise. Her eyes and mouth were struck wide open as she blankly stared forward. She just sat on top of me, wordless and silent. No doubt an entirely different set of emotions were blazing their way through her mind at the same blinding speed I was experiencing. I just couldn't bring myself to look any longer. So I closed my eyes and used whatever strength I had to push her off of me and onto the ground. The pain from being whacked in the face multiple times with a gun started to catch up with me. My head ached as I sat still for a few moments, trying to recover from nearly having the life choked out of me. I managed to find my way back to my feet while checking myself for injury. I thankfully didn't find any busted teeth or broken bones. God damn, if everything didn't seriously hurt right now. I felt like the world's loudest alarm clock was ringing right next to my head. I took one last involuntary look down at Laurie, who'd landed face down on the floor. I immediately regretted doing so. Her motionless form was the last thing I wanted to see right now, and I nearly smacked the shit out of myself for making that mistake. Not that I wouldn't have enough time to beat myself up over it later anyway. None of that mattered right now, though. After shaking more of the fuzziness out of my head, I turned my attention toward Toko. moment I tried to speak, I found myself at a complete loss for words. I nervously cleared my throat to try to re-break the ice that had formed thanks to this entire messed up situation. Hey. Toko? She just looked at me, her face wearing a blank expression. Not that I didn't expect things to be weird, after what the both of us had just been subjected to, and after what I'd done right in front of her. More than a little shock and hesitation was to be expected. Hey, Toko? I was at a complete loss. I had no idea what to say or do. The only thing that made immediate sense is that we had to get out of here. Toko, we should probably leave now. She had said nothing, and it was starting to make me feel uneasy. Come on, we have to go. We have to see if we can get help. A quick glint of light caught my eye. Following it, I instinctively knew what it was. She was still holding the knife Lori had made her pick up earlier. All the hits I'd taken to the head earlier were really taking a toll. Hey, Toko, you can probably put that down now. She took a step forward, gripping the knife in her hand with the blade's tip pointed toward me. Hey, come on. Put it down, Toko. Another step. What was she doing? Toko, seriously. Put the knife down, and let's just get out of here. She took yet another step toward me. Did she really intend to? I shifted my focus from Toko for a moment. Something felt wrong, and it didn't take long for me to realize what that was. My right arm was extended toward Toko, and in my hand was the gun. No. No, 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 no! What the fuck was happening? Hadn't we come too far for things to end up right back where we started? I could feel the ringing in my ears worsening again, my chest getting tighter, my vision slowly fading. No, I was not letting this happen again. Absolutely not. Oh boy. I won't do it. I won't fucking do it! Fuck you! I tossed the gun to the side and heard it slide across the floor. I took a step backward and put my hands up to confirm to her that I was unarmed and that I meant no harm. Toko, listen to me. It's okay. The gun's gone. You can put the knife down now, okay? I'm not going to hurt you, I swear. She just continued to coldly stare me down. I could feel tears in my eyes as I pled with her. Toko, I'm so sorry about Lori. I didn't want to. I just... Before I could even finish my sentence, in a flash, Toko had rushed me. I was already in no condition for another fight, so she was able to take me down to the floor with relative ease. I felt a sharp pain in my right bicep, and the intensity grew by the second. I howled in pain as I looked over and saw Toko's knife planted in my arm with her on top of me, bearing down harder with her weight. Toko, please! You have to stop! I pleaded with her, tears in my eyes, unable to hide behind the cool exterior I kept up until now. I was too broken at this point to put on any more fronts. The physical pain and mental anguish were just too much. Toko, this isn't you. You know it's not. She relentlessly shoved the knife further into my arm as far as she could as my tortured screams and pleading filled the room. You're scared. I am too. I just want to go home. I knew from our experiences earlier that my words weren't reaching her. All she cared about right now was the pain. The fucking static and the pain that might stop for 1 single second if she could just hurt me bad enough. I felt so helpless. From the moment Lori had entered the picture, I'd only really cared about finding a way for Toko to get out of here alive, even if it cost me my life. So many questions screamed through my head. Would I be okay with things ending like this? Would Toko be okay with things ending like this? So what's your answer? I mustered every bit of strength I had left, gritting my teeth through the pain, and I did my best to wrap my arms around her, letting her knife dig deeper into me. I somehow found the fortitude to lift my legs up and wrap them around her as well, keeping her as restricted as possible. She violently struggled against me, but even being banged up and fatigued, I was just naturally stronger than her. I held on, refusing to let go until my body absolutely gave out, and leaned in toward her. Her struggling slowly subsided and gave way to tears. Her eyes no longer looked vacant. She wore an expression of horror. Sal. Oh my God. She sat up on top of me, cupping her hands over her mouth as she apologized. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I pulled her back down into my embrace, my own tears and apologies matching hers. It's okay, Toko. It's okay. No, it's not, Sal. I held her tight, trying to calm her shaking and crying. And, for whatever reason, I just kissed her. I was surprised when I felt her kiss me back. I doubt either of us really knew why it happened. Maybe we were just thankful that this nightmare was almost over. She sat up at my waist again, rubbing her eyes and sniffling. I'm not scared of storms anymore, you know. That sense of humor, even now. Yeah, well, I'm not a good singer. Sounds like we're even. I mean, minus the whole knife thing. She looked over at the arm she'd impaled and once again recoiled. Sal, Hey, can you get up for a minute? Also, you're probably gonna want to look away. Without a word, she rose to her feet, dusted off her coat a bit, and turned her back to me. I sat up and gritted my teeth. I knew this would hurt like hell. I gripped the handle of the knife with my left hand, looked away, and... Fuck! I spitefully chucked the knife away toward the wall, the metal clang and my shouted expletive forcing Toko to turn back around. Almost immediately, the wound bled through the sleeve of my sweatshirt, but given everything I'd already been through today, this really felt like nothing. Hey, Toko. How good are you with blood? What do you mean? I'm gonna need you to help me patch this up until we can get some real help. Okay. Following my instructions, I had Toko grab the knife I'd thrown and carefully cut up the right sleeve from my sweatshirt. She gagged seeing the fresh wound, but took a deep breath and tied the fabric around my arm to create a makeshift tourniquet. Once she finished, we'd faced toward the exit and prepared to leave. As we headed toward the door, Toko stopped and looked over toward Lori. Toko, I'm so sorry. She shook her head. No. I mean, it's not that I don't feel anything, but you heard her. We're not the only ones. There was nothing more I could really say. There was no need for us to stay here and try to figure out the whys or the hows. It was time to escape this wretched place. It was just an empty warehouse. Cold and silent, with enough light poking through to give the place a creepy atmosphere that made my skin crawl. I didn't even care at this point. I just wanted out of here, and I knew that Toko felt the same way. After a little searching, we found our way to a large metal door that seemed to be the entrance to this place. Toko helped me slide the door open, and what felt like for the first time in ages, we finally saw daylight. After a bit of walking, we found ourselves in a sprawling forest. We had no idea where we were going, or what we were going to do once we found our way back to society. Questions loomed in both our minds as we felt our way through the foliage, pushing overgrown branches aside and following a hardly visible makeshift path that seemed to lead from the warehouse. It was getting colder, which meant that darkness was quickly approaching, but we agreed that if we followed the path we were on, we'd eventually find our way back. As the temperature declined, I found myself walking closer and closer to Toko until we were shoulder to shoulder. After a few more minutes of walking, I felt her grab my hand. I locked fingers with hers, taking a moment to rest my head on her shoulder before wrapping my arm around her and pulling her closer. Questions crept into my mind about everything that happened and what I'd done, but I just couldn't dwell on them. Right now, all I wanted was to feel her warmth. We'd survived, and that's all we needed for now. We'd escaped an indescribable nightmare. We'd done terrible things that would likely haunt us for the rest of our lives. But in that moment, all that mattered was that we were free. Well, that was certainly something. I guess that's about as happy of an ending as we can realistically expect. We get to see the fine folks who were involved with this production. But I don't think we're quite done yet. As we shall shortly see. So here are a few endings to look through. Sudden end. Yeah, rushing was a bad idea. So that's how it ends, huh? I guess I should get going too. So I'm going to stop there for now. There is still one little order of business to attend to. So stay tuned until we obviously come back the next time around. This is Poncho Smith, signing off momentarily.